welcome back to whispers in the dark. Dim the lights, lock the doors, and make sure there is nothing waiting beyond the window glass. What you are about to hear is a nightmare from the dead heart of rural Texas, a place where the roads run straight through dust and silence, where the sun bleaches bones white, and where some houses should never be found. This is a story about hunger, family, and the terrible things that can be built from the bodies of the lost. Now let's begin. They found the road just before sunset, though none of them remembered seeing it on the map. It unspooled from the highway like a black tongue, narrow and cracked, leading away from the last gas station for 70 miles, and into a country that seemed to have been abandoned by both God and the state. On either side, the land stretched flat and yellow, a dead ocean of dry grass, mesquite, rusted fence wire, and cattle skulls half buried in the dirt. The evening sun hung low and swollen, casting the whole world in a feverish orange light. Mara was the first to notice the sign. It leaned against a fence post, warped by heat, its paint blistered and peeling. The words had once been white, but now they were the color of old teeth. Cress Road. She slowed the van and leaned forward over the wheel, squinting through the dusty windshield. That cannot be right, she said. Beside her, Owen looked up from the folded paper map spread across his lap. He was the kind of man who hated being lost, because being lost meant admitting that the world was bigger than his plans. His hair was dark and carefully combed, though the heat had begun to curl it at the edges. Sweat darkened the collar of his shirt. "There is no Cress Road here," he said. "There is a county road 3 miles east, but not this." From the back seat, Celia lifted her head from the window, where she had been watching the sunset smear across the glass. She had sharp green eyes, pale skin burned pink across the nose, and a restless energy that made silence uncomfortable for her. "Maybe the map is old." "The map is from last year," Owen said. Tate stretched out across the rear bench with one boot pressed against a cooler, laughed softly. He was broad-shouldered, easy-smiling, and so used to making light of things that nobody could tell when he was actually afraid. His straw hat was pulled low over his brow. "A road is a road," he said. "We need gas. We need water. We need somewhere with a phone before Mara murders all of us for breathing too loud." Mara did not laugh. Her fingers tightened on the steering wheel. The van coughed beneath them, a metallic rattle trembling through the floorboards. The fuel gauge rested below empty with the stubborn finality of a death certificate. They had been driving since noon, chasing a location for Owen's documentary about vanished towns and forgotten industries. He wanted pictures of abandoned slaughterhouses, closed meat packing plants, and rural communities dried out by economic ruin. Mara had come because she handled his camera work, and because 3 months earlier they had almost been engaged. Celia had come because she wrote the narration and loved haunted places as long as ghosts were the only things haunting them. Tate had come because he owned the van and had promised promised he knew every back road in the state. He did not. Now the highway behind them shimmered empty in the heat. The sun was sinking, and the van was making a sound like something loose and desperate was trying to escape the engine. Mara looked down Cress Road. The pavement quickly turned to gravel, then dirt. Far in the distance, beyond a row of leaning telephone poles, something glinted. A roof, maybe, or a window. "We try it for 5 minutes," she said. "If there is nothing, we turn around." Owen folded the map with irritated precision. "Fine." Celia pressed her face closer to the glass. "I hate it already." "Good," Tate said. "That means it has character." Mara turned the wheel. The van left the highway and entered the road that was not on the map. At once, the world changed. The sound of the highway fell away, as if a door had closed behind them. Gravel popped beneath the tires. Dust rose in thick red clouds, swallowing the rear windows. The air inside the van grew heavier, sour with old upholstery, hot plastic, and the faint spoiled smell coming from the cooler. The road wound through scrubland and broken fences. Now and then, they passed the remains of farm equipment, tractors with no wheels, plows twisted like blackened ribs, a refrigerator lying open in a ditch. After a mile, they came upon the first house. It sat back from the road behind a fence made from uneven posts and wire. The house was small, gray, and bowed in the middle, as though it had grown tired of standing. Its windows were boarded. The porch sagged. Dozens of animal bones hung from strings along the eaves, clacking softly in the faint wind. Celia whispered, "Nope." Myra did not stop. A mile after that, they saw a church with no steeple. Its doors were open, but the inside was dark. A rusted bell lay in the grass. On the front steps, arranged in a careful circle, were jars filled with something cloudy and pale. Owen turned to look as they passed. "Did you see those?" "Do not ask that," Mara said. Tate sat up, smile fading. "Maybe this road was used by ranchers. Ranchers who decorate with bones and jars." Celia asked. "People get lonely." The van coughed again, harder this time. The engine stuttered. Mara pressed the gas, but the pedal had gone soft. The van lurched forward another 50 feet, then rolled to a stop in the middle of the road. No one spoke. The engine ticked. Dust drifted past the windows. Mara turned the key. The starter whined, caught, then died. She tried again. "Nothing." "Please tell me this is a joke," Celia said. Tate opened the door and stepped out into the heat. "Let me look." The moment the door opened, the smell entered. It was not simply rot. It was meat gone bad in the sun, mixed with engine oil, damp soil, old smoke, and something sweet enough to make the back of the throat tighten. It rolled over them in a slow wave. Celia covered her nose with her shirt. "God, what is that?" Owen climbed out, map still in hand. "Probably a dead animal." Mara stepped into the road and looked around. The sun had almost touched the horizon. Shadows stretched long and thin across the dirt. In the distance, past the telephone poles, she could see the roof she had noticed from the highway. Not one roof, actually. Several. A cluster of buildings sat in a hollow between two low rises, surrounded by dead trees and rusted vehicles. There, she said. Tate had opened the hood. A puff of steam rose into his face, and he jumped back. Radiator is gone, he said, or close to it. Belt looks bad too. Owen walked toward the front of the van. Can you fix it? With what? Celia's lip balm and your superiority complex. Celia got out and slammed the door. There were houses back there. Boarded up, Myra said. There are buildings ahead. Owen shaded his eyes. Maybe a farm. They might have a phone. Tate glanced toward the sinking sun. Nobody loves a plan that starts with walking toward the murder farm. But here we are. They took water, flashlights, Owen's camera bag, and Tate's tire iron. Mara locked the van, though she immediately felt foolish. There was nobody around to steal anything, and if there was, a locked door would not matter. They began walking. The road dipped toward the hollow. The heat eased with the sunset, but the smell strengthened. Flies appeared in black clusters, whining around their heads. The telephone poles along the road carried no wires. They stood like stripped gallows, leaning at odd angles, each one marked with dark stains near the base. Mara tried not to look at the stains. Celia walked close beside her. Tell me why we did not stay on the highway. Because the van died. No, before that. Because we are idiots. That feels true. Owen had taken out his camera and was filming the road ahead. Mara, he said, look at this light. She stared at him. Are you serious? This is exactly the kind of texture we need. The van is dead. We are lost. And something smells like a slaughterhouse buried under a graveyard, which is why we should document it. Tate shook his head. Man, one day something is going to eat you while you are adjusting focus. They crested the low rise and saw the property clearly. It had once been a farmhouse, large and white, but age and weather had reduced it to a warped, stained thing with a rust-red roof and a porch crowded by hanging shapes. Around it stood a barn, a smokehouse, 2 sheds, and a water tower with its legs sunk crookedly into the earth. Old vehicles filled the yard, trucks without tires, a school bus with shattered windows, a hearse gray with dust. Bones lay everywhere, not scattered randomly, but arranged. Along the fence, cattle skulls were nailed in a row. From the branches of a dead oak hung wind chimes made from small bones and metal scraps. They clicked together in the breeze with a sound like teeth chattering. The farmhouse windows were dark. A single yellow bulb burned above the porch. Mara stopped walking. No one else moved for a moment. Then Celia said, very softly, no. Owen lowered the camera. Tate gripped the tire iron. From somewhere behind the house came a mechanical sound, low and uneven. Not an engine. Not exactly. It rose, coughed, settled into a growl, then stopped. A chainsaw. Mara felt the hair on her arms lift. Maybe someone is cutting wood, Owen said, though he sounded as if he did not believe himself. In Texas, Tate said, at sunset, in May, on the Bone Farm. The front door of the house opened. An old woman stepped onto the porch. She was tall and thin, wearing a faded blue dress that hung from her like cloth from a fence post. Her hair was long, gray, and braided over one shoulder. Her face was deeply lined, her skin yellowed by age and tobacco, her eyes bright with a strange, wet kindness. She raised one hand. "Well now," she called, "you children lost." Her voice was gentle. That made it worse. Owen answered first. "Yes, ma'am. Our van broke down up the road. We were hoping to use a phone." The woman looked past them, toward the road. "Van, you say?" "Yes." She smiled, revealing teeth too large and too white to be her own. "Ain't had a working phone here in years." Celia swallowed. "Is there anyone nearby who does?" The woman looked at Celia for a long time. Her smile did not change. "Nearest town is Mercywell. 29 miles if you know the road. More if you don't." Tate muttered, "Of course it is called Mercywell." The old woman stepped aside and opened the door wider. "Come in. I got water. My boy can look at your van when he comes back from the shed." Nobody moved. The house exhaled darkness. Mara could smell something cooking inside, something greasy and heavy, onions and iron and smoke. Owen wiped his forehead. "We appreciate it. We really do. Maybe we could just get some water and be on our way." "Sun's going down," the woman said. "Road gets hard to see. Things move at night out here." "What things?" Celia asked. The old woman's eyes glittered. "Hungry things." Behind them, far up the road, the van horn suddenly blared. One long, continuous scream. All four of them spun around. The sound echoed across the hollow, harsh and impossible. The van was too far away to see clearly, only a small pale shape near the road bend. The horn kept wailing. Then it stopped. Silence crashed down. Mara's mouth went dry. Tate raised the tire iron. What the hell was that? The old woman sighed behind them. Probably the heat. Owen stared at her. The heat pressed the horn. Old vehicles do funny things. Mara backed away from the porch. "We are leaving." The woman's smile faded, not into anger, but into disappointment. "You should drink first." "No, thank you." Celia was already stepping backward. Owen hesitated, looking at the camera in his hands, at the house, at the dying light. Then another sound came from the barn. A dull thump, then another, then a muffled cry. Not an animal, human. Celia froze. Mara looked toward the barn. Its double doors were chained shut from the outside, but there was a gap between the boards. Something moved behind it. Tate whispered, "Did you hear that?" Owen lifted the camera. The old woman said, "You ought not be rude." The porch boards creaked behind her. A figure appeared in the doorway. He was enormous. He had to bend to pass under the frame, his shoulders filling the entrance. He wore a butcher's apron stiff with dark stains over a sweat-soaked shirt. His arms were thick, pale, and scarred. In one hand, he held a meat hook. In the other, a hammer with a wooden handle blackened from use. But it was his face that made Celia begin to cry. It was not his face. A mask covered it, stitched together from several pieces of preserved human skin. The mouth was too wide, the cheeks uneven, the eye holes ragged. A woman's lips had been stretched into a crooked grin across where his own mouth should have been. Dark hair, not his, had been sewn along the scalp line in clumps. The thing on his face shifted slightly when he breathed. The old woman touched his arm with pride. "This is my Abel," she said. "He don't talk much." Abel made a sound deep in his chest. Mara ran. The others followed. They bolted toward the road, shoes slipping in dust, breath tearing in their lungs. Behind them, the old woman laughed, high and shrill, and Abel roared. The porch steps groaned under his weight as he descended. For 3 seconds, Mara believed they might make it. Then a second figure stepped out from behind the dead oak. He was younger than the old woman, but older than the travelers, perhaps 50, with a narrow face, greasy hair, and a grin full of brown teeth. He wore a mechanic's shirt with the name Sila's stitched above the pocket. In his hands was a shotgun. "Easy now," he said. Tate swung the tire iron without stopping. The shotgun fired. The blast struck the dirt at Tate's feet, throwing dust and stones against his legs. He stumbled, but kept moving. Silas cursed and raised the gun again. Owen grabbed Celia by the arm and dragged her toward the line of dead trucks, away from the road. Mara veered after them. Tate followed, limping. Abel charged. He moved with terrifying speed for such a large man, boots pounding the yard, hammer swinging at his side. He did not shout words. He made raw animal sounds, grunts and squeals of excitement, as though the chase delighted and frightened him all at once. They reached the vehicles. Mara ducked between 2 trucks. Owen pulled Celia behind the school bus. Tate scrambled after them, clutching his left thigh, where blood ran dark through his jeans from flying shrapnel. "Keep going," Mara gasped. The school bus door hung open. Owen shoved Celia inside and climbed after her. Mara hesitated, looked back, and saw Abel slam into the side of a truck hard enough to rock it on its dead suspension. His hammer came down on the hood with a metallic crash. Tate pushed Mara toward the bus. "Move." They stumbled inside. The bus smelled of mildew, dust, and old sun-baked vinyl. Seats were torn open. Flies buzzed against the windows. Children's drawings had been taped above the driver's seat long ago, now faded to ghostly smears. Owen crouched in the aisle, panting. There has to be an emergency exit. At the back, Celia said. They moved down the aisle. A shadow crossed the front windows. Abel climbed into the bus. His head nearly touched the ceiling. The mask glistened in the last red light, the dead grin trembling as he breathed. He lifted the hammer and struck the metal pole beside the driver's seat. The sound exploded inside the bus. Celia screamed. Owen reached the back door and shoved at the handle. It did not move. He kicked it. Rust screamed but held. "Mara," he shouted. She joined him, both hands on the lever, pulling with everything she had. Tate braced himself and slammed his shoulder into the door. Once, twice. Abel came down the aisle. Slowly now, enjoying it. The hammer dragged along the seat backs, ripping vinyl, knocking loose strips of stuffing. He tilted his masked head, as though studying which of them would break first. Tate turned to face him. "No," Mara said. Tate looked at her, and for the first time since she had known him, the humor was gone from his face. "Get it open." He stepped forward with the tire iron. Abel lunged. Tate swung and struck the side of Abel's head. The blow would have dropped a smaller man. Abel staggered one step, then turned back with a wounded squeal. Tate swung again, but Abel caught his wrist in one huge hand. The tire iron fell. Abel drove him backward into the seats with crushing force. Mara and Owen slammed into the rear door together. It burst open. Cooler evening air rushed in. Celia fell out first, then Owen. Mara turned back. Tate had one hand pressed against Abel's chest, trying to hold him off. Abel raised the hammer. Mara saw Tate's eyes find hers. "Go," he mouthed. The hammer came down. Mara did not see the full blow. She saw Tate's body jerk, heard the wet crack of violence meeting bone, and watched his hand slide away from Abel's apron, leaving a red smear behind. Abel struck again, and the sound was worse than the first, not louder, but heavier, final. Tate folded into the aisle between the seats, his hat crushed beside him. Celia screamed from outside. Owen grabbed Mara and pulled her through the rear exit just as Abel roared and swung the hammer into the door frame. They ran. Behind them, from inside the bus, came a sawing, hacking noise. Abel was breathing hard, making small, excited sounds. Mara did not let herself imagine what he was doing. She ran until the yard blurred. The 3 survivors reached the barn. The muffled cry came again from inside. Owen stopped. "No," Mara said. "No, Owen. There is someone in there. We cannot leave them." Celia was sobbing. "Tate is dead." Owen looked at Mara with wild eyes. "Then we do not let someone else die." It was the kind of thing Owen said when cameras were rolling. Noble, clean, meant for an audience. But here, in the dusk, with Tate's blood still in Mara's mind, it sounded like madness. Silas shouted from near the house. "Abel, bring them round." The chains on the barn doors rattled from inside. Owen grabbed a rusted crowbar leaning against a trough and jammed it through the chain loop. Mara knew they should keep running. She knew it with every part of her. But then a face appeared in the gap between the barn boards. A boy, maybe 17. His face was swollen, one eye nearly shut, his mouth gagged with cloth. He looked at them with such naked terror that Mara could not move away. Owen wrenched the crowbar. The chain snapped. The barn doors opened a foot. The boy stumbled out, hands tied behind his back. Celia pulled the gag from his mouth. "Run," he rasped. "What is your name?" Owen asked. "Micah, please. You have to run." "Where?" "Anywhere but the house." Mara cut the rope around his wrists with Celia's pocket knife. Behind them, the school bus shook. Abel stepped out of it. The lower half of his apron was darker now. In his hand, he carried the tire iron. Tate's tire iron. He had forgotten the hammer or abandoned it, and somehow that felt worse, as if he liked choosing new tools from the dead. Silas stood on the porch with the shotgun. The old woman beside him clapped her hands. "Dinner's wandering," she called. Micah's eyes went huge. "The creek bed," he said, "behind the smokehouse. It goes under the fence." They ran around the barn, through weeds and scrap piles, past hanging hooks that turned slowly in the wind. The smokehouse stood behind the farmhouse, square and blackened, its chimney leaning. Beside it, a shallow ditch cut through the yard and disappeared beneath a broken section of fence. Mara slid down first, scraping her palms on rocks. Celia followed. Owen helped Micah, who was weak and stumbling. They crawled under the fence just as Silas fired again. The blast struck the fence post above them, raining splinters into Mara's hair. Beyond the fence, the ditch deepened into a dry creek bed lined with stones and thorn bushes. They ran crouched, hidden below the level of the land. Darkness gathered quickly. The sky turned purple, then blue-black. Stars began to appear, cold and indifferent. For a while, there was only the sound of their breathing and feet striking stone. Then the chainsaw started. It screamed awake behind them, a ragged metallic howl that tore through the night. Birds erupted from the dead trees. Celia clapped her hands over her ears and nearly fell. Micah whimpered. "Do not stop," Mara said. The creek bed twisted through the scrub. Thorn branches clawed at their clothes and skin. Owen dropped the camera bag, but did not go back for it. Mara's legs burned. Her throat tasted of dust and fear. The chainsaw faded, then grew louder. "He knows this land," Micah said. "He knows every path." "How do you know?" Celia gasped. Micah did not answer. They came to a culvert where the creek bed passed beneath a dirt service road. The concrete tunnel was low and black. A trickle of foul water glistened along the bottom. Mara crouched at the entrance. "Through." Celia shook her head. No tunnels. "Through." They crawled inside. The tunnel smelled of mold and animal droppings. Their hands splashed in shallow water. Something skittered away in the dark. Mara's flashlight trembled in her grip, casting wild circles against the concrete walls. Names had been scratched into the surface. Dates, prayers, small, desperate marks made by fingernails or knives. Halfway through, the chainsaw stopped. Silence flooded the tunnel. Owen froze. Mara whispered, "Keep moving." Then the flashlight caught something ahead. A pile of objects blocked the far end. At first, Mara thought it was brush. Then she saw shoes, belts, backpacks, a child's stuffed rabbit blackened with mildew, wallets, broken eyeglasses, a mound of belongings stripped from people who had come before them. Celia began to hyperventilate. Micah pushed past, shoving the pile aside with shaking hands. "They keep trophies everywhere," he whispered. "To remember." "Who are they?" Owen asked. Micah looked back at him. The Cress family. A shape appeared behind them, at the tunnel entrance. Abel crouched there, filling the opening. He did not have the chainsaw with him. It would not fit. Instead, he reached one arm into the tunnel, fingers spreading and scraping along the concrete. He made a soft cooing sound through the mask. Celia screamed and crawled forward over the pile of belongings. Mara shoved her through the opening. Owen followed, dragging Micah. Abel's hand closed around Mara's ankle. The grip was enormous. Mara kicked, but he held fast. His fingers dug into her boot. He pulled, and her body slid backward through the filthy water. She clawed at the concrete, nails scraping, flashlight spinning away. Owen grabbed her wrists. "Mara." Abel pulled harder. For one terrible second, she was stretched between them. Owen's hands slick with mud. Abel's fingers locked around her ankle. She looked back and saw the mask in the darkness, the dead lips grinning, the eyes behind it alive and frantic. Celia appeared beside Owen with a jagged piece of glass from a broken picture frame in the pile. She stabbed downward at Abel's hand. Not deep, not enough to maim, but enough to shock him. Abel shrieked and let go. Owen yanked Mara free. They tumbled out the far end of the culvert, into weeds. Behind them, Abel slammed his fist against the concrete wall. Once, twice, the sound boomed through the tunnel like a drum. They staggered away into the night. Micah led them toward a line of trees. He moved with the desperate certainty of someone escaping a nightmare he had studied for too long. Under the trees, the air cooled. The smell of the Cress place weakened, replaced by dust, bark, and the faint mineral scent of dry earth. They stopped behind a fallen trunk. No one could speak at first. Mara's ankle throbbed. Celia's hands were shaking so violently that she had to press them beneath her arms. Owen had lost his glasses somewhere. Without them, his face looked younger, more helpless. Micah crouched, listening. "How far to the highway?" Mara asked. "Too far." "How far?" "Maybe 10 miles if we go straight." "But straight crosses their fields." Celia wiped her nose with the back of her hand. Why were you in the barn? Micah stared at the ground. My sister and I came looking for our father. He drove this road 2 weeks ago and never came home. We found the house. They found us. His voice broke. What happened to your sister? Owen asked. Micah looked toward the farmhouse lights, glowing faintly through the trees. They put her at the table. No one asked what that meant. They waited until the chainsaw started again, farther away now, toward the culvert. Abel had gone around. He was hunting the creek bed. Micah pointed through the trees. There is a place where the fence is down. Past that is the old packing plant. If we reach it, there might be a road. Owen looked at Mara. She hated him a little then. Hated the pleading in his face. Hated that he still believed movement meant survival. Hated that she had no better idea. They went on. The old packing plant rose from the dark, like a dead city. It sat beyond the trees in a clearing of cracked concrete and weeds, a long brick building with broken windows and a collapsed smokestack. Faded letters on the wall read Cress, Family Meets. Beneath the letters was a painted cow with cheerful eyes, its smile chipped away by weather. Loading bays yawned open. Rusted hooks hung from overhead rails that ran from the building toward the yard. Mara stopped at the edge of the clearing. This was theirs. Micah nodded. The town, too, before it dried up, before the inspections, before people started disappearing. Celia hugged herself. Why would we go in there? Because Abel does not like the plant, Micah said. That was the first thing he had said that gave Mara any hope. Why? Micah looked at the broken windows. Too many memories. They crossed the clearing. Inside, the plant was a cathedral of rot. Moonlight fell through holes in the roof. The concrete floor was stained with old darkness. Chains dangled from rails overhead, swaying in a breeze they could not feel. There were rooms lined with cracked white tile, drains in the floor, steel tables spotted with rust, and conveyor belts frozen in place like black tongues. Owen moved through it as if half dreaming. This place should have been demolished. Lots of things should have happened, Mara said. They found an office near the front with a metal desk and a filing cabinet. The phone on the desk had no cord. Papers carpeted the floor, curled and yellowed. Owen picked one up and held it close to his face. Inspection notice, he said. 1988. Mara did not care. Windows, doors, anything facing a road. Celia was looking at the wall. Photographs hung there beneath a gray film of dust. Men in aprons standing in front of the plant. Trucks loaded with wrapped meat. A ribbon cutting. Children at a picnic. And in the center, a family portrait. The old woman stood young and stern, her gray eyes already hard. Beside her was a man with a butcher's build and a preacher's smile. Silas stood as a thin teenage boy in a mechanic's cap. A little girl sat in front, unsmiling. And behind them, towering even then, was Abel. He wore no mask in the photograph. His face was broad and pale, with soft features and frightened eyes. One side of his jaw was scarred. He looked less like a monster than a boy who had been told the world would hurt him and who had believed it. Celia whispered, "What happened to them?" Micah answered from the doorway, "They happened to everybody else." A sound came from the plant floor. Metal clinking, one chain striking another. Mara gestured for silence. They listened. Footsteps, not Abel's heavy tread, lighter, slower. Sila's appeared at the far end of the hall, shotgun resting on his shoulder. "Well," he said, smiling, "you all found the family business." Mara, Owen, Celia, and Micah backed into the office. Silas took a step closer. "You know, most folks just scream and run. I appreciate the curious ones. Makes it feel like a tour." Owen grabbed the metal desk chair and hurled it at him. Silas fired. The blast shattered the office window and peppered the desk with pellets. Owen threw himself to the floor. Mara yanked Celia behind the filing cabinet. Micah grabbed the phone from the desk and smashed it against Silas's wrist as he entered. The shotgun dropped. Mara kicked it under the desk. Silas snarled and struck Micah across the face, sending him into the wall. Celia lunged for the shotgun. Silas grabbed her hair and pulled her back. She screamed, twisting, fingers clawing at his arm. Owen tackled him from the side. They crashed into the filing cabinet. Drawers burst open, spilling records across the floor. Mara seized a rusted letter opener from the desk and drove it into Silas's shoulder. He howled and let go of Celia. For an instant, his face changed. The grin vanished. Beneath it was hatred so pure it seemed older than him. "You little meat," he hissed. Micah lifted the shotgun. His hands shook. Silas laughed. "You ain't got shells." Micah pulled the trigger. The blast punched Silas backward through the broken office window. He landed on the plant floor amid glittering glass and did not rise. The sound echoed through the building. Everyone stared. Celia began to sob again, this time without sound. Owen picked himself up, bleeding from a cut above his eye. Mara looked at Micah. "You said there might be a road." Micah lowered the shotgun. "There is, through the loading bay." Then from outside, the chainsaw roared. Not far, very close. Abel had heard the shot. They ran through the plant. The chainsaw scream filled the halls, bouncing off tile and steel, until it seemed to come from every direction. Mara's flashlight was gone. Moonlight and memory guided them. They passed old cutting rooms, freezers with doors hanging open, locker rooms where boots still sat beneath benches. The loading bay lay ahead, a rectangle of night beyond the rusted doors. Celia reached it first. Then the floor gave way beneath her. She vanished with a scream. Mara dropped to her knees at the edge of a maintenance pit, hidden beneath rotten boards. Owen grabbed her belt to keep her from falling in. Below, Celia lay among broken planks and pipes, gasping. "Mara," she cried. My leg. The pit was 12 feet deep, too deep to climb quickly. A rusted ladder clung to one wall, but several rungs were missing. Micah looked back down the hall. A large shadow moved across the tiles. Abel entered the loading corridor with the chainsaw in both hands. The saw was old and filthy, its blade dark, its motor coughing smoke. Abel wore a new mask now. This one had a man's nose, a woman's cheek, and eyelids sewn half closed above the eye holes, making him look sleepy and sorrowful. Strands of different colored hair hung from the crown. The mask shifted as he tilted his head at them. The chainsaw screamed higher. Owen looked at Celia in the pit, then at Abel. "We need time." Mara understood before he moved. Owen, no. He smiled at her then. Not his camera smile, not the clever one. A small, broken human thing. "I am sorry," he said. "For what?" "For bringing us here." He grabbed a hanging chain from the rail overhead and swung it hard into Abel's path. The hook at the end struck the chainsaw casing. Sparks jumped. Abel staggered, startled. Owen ran sideways through the loading bay, shouting, drawing him away from the pit. "Come on," he screamed. "Come on." Abel followed. Mara heard the chainsaw roar, heard Owen overturn a metal cart, heard the crash as Abel smashed through it. She did not look. She lowered herself into the pit, boots searching for the ladder. Micah held the shotgun above, watching the corridor. Celia's face was white with pain. "I cannot climb," she said. "You can." "My leg is wrong." "You can." Mara got under her arm and pushed. Celia cried out, biting down on her sleeve to muffle it. Together they reached the ladder. Above them, Micah reached down. Then Owen screamed. It was brief, cut off almost at once. The chainsaw sputtered, then idled. Myra looked up. Micah's face had changed. He saw something she could not see from the pit. His mouth opened. No sound came out. Then he aimed the shotgun down the corridor and fired. The blast was followed by Abel's roar. Micah reached down with both hands. "Now." Mara pushed Celia upward. Micah pulled. Celia screamed with every movement, but she climbed. Mara followed, hands slipping on rust. When she reached the top, she saw the corridor. Owen lay near the overturned cart, motionless, one arm outstretched, as if reaching for a camera that was no longer there. The details were hidden by shadow, and Mara was grateful for the darkness. Abel stood beyond him, clutching his side where the shotgun had torn his apron and shirt. He swayed, wounded but not stopped. The chainsaw hung from his other hand. Micah had no time to reload. They dragged Celia through the loading bay and out into the night. Behind the plant was a road, not much of one, just 2 ruts through weeds, but it led away from the property. At the end of it, perhaps a 1/4 mile distant, they could see the outline of a small building and the shape of fuel pumps. "A station," Mara breathed. Micah nodded. "Old company station, Might be a radio. Celia leaned heavily on Mara, half hopping, half being carried. Micah supported her other side. They moved as fast as they could, which was not fast enough. Behind them, Abel emerged from the plant. He did not run at first. He watched them, then he lifted the chainsaw and started forward. The old company station was a square concrete building with a rusted canopy and two ancient pumps standing like sentries in the dirt. The windows were barred. The front door was chained, but the side door hung crooked. Inside, the air was stale and hot. Shelves stood empty except for rat droppings and faded cans. A counter faced the front windows. Behind it was a radio, old but intact, connected to a battery box. Mara nearly cried at the sight. Micah bolted the side door. Celia collapsed behind the counter, shaking. Mara turned the radio knobs. Static hissed. "Come on," she whispered. She tried every channel. Static, a burst of distant music. Static again. Then a voice. Faint, broken, but human. County Dispatch. Mara seized the microphone. "Hello, hello. We need help. We are on Cress Road near the old Cress family meats plant. 3 people are dead. There is a man with a chainsaw. Please send police." Static. She repeated it. The voice came back, clearer. "Caller, identify your location. Cress Road, old meat plant, please." A pause. Then, "Ma'am, there is no Cress Road in service." Mara laughed once, a terrible dry sound. "It is here." Micah stood at the window, peering through the bars. "He is coming." Mara pressed the microphone again. "Listen to me. There is an old farmhouse, a plant, a station, the Cress family. Send everyone." The dispatcher said something, but static swallowed it. Then the radio died. The lights in the station flickered. Celia whispered, "Lights." Myra looked up. A bare bulb hung above the counter, glowing weakly. A generator hummed somewhere outside. Micah's face went slack. They turned it on. From the front window, a voice called, "You all sound scared in there." The old woman stood beneath the canopy, smiling through the bars. Her blue dress moved gently in the wind. She carried a lantern in one hand and a long carving knife in the other. "You hurt my Silas," she said. "That was unkind." Mara grabbed the shotgun from Micah and broke it open. Empty. Micah searched the shelves frantically. The old woman came closer to the window. "My husband built this road, built the plant, built the town. People came from everywhere to work for us. Then they came with rules. Clean this, label that, pay them, feed them. As if hunger ever followed rules." Her eyes moved to Celia. "Pretty one is ripe with fear. Fear sweetens the meat." Celia pressed herself against the counter. Mara found a box beneath the register. Inside were 3 shells, green and dusty. Her hands shook as she loaded them. The old woman saw and laughed. "You think a gun stops family." The chainsaw answered her from the dark. Abel reached the station. He struck the side door once with his shoulder. The whole building shook. Celia cried out. Mara raised the shotgun toward the door. Micah grabbed a metal shelf brace and stood beside her. Abel hit the door again. The bolt bent. The old woman began to sing outside. Her voice was thin and sweet, an old hymn twisted by age. The words were about gathering at the river, but she sang them as if the river ran red. A third blow. The side door burst inward. Abel filled the frame. Mara fired. The blast struck him in the chest and drove him backward a step. He screamed, not in pain alone, but in outrage. The chainsaw fell silent as he dropped it. Then he lunged into the station with his hands out. Micah swung the shelf brace into Abel's face. The mask tore loose at one side, revealing a glimpse of pale skin and a wet, dark eye beneath. Abel shrieked and slammed Micah into the wall. The plaster cracked. Micah fell, stunned. Mara fired again. This time Abel twisted, and the shot shattered the shelves behind him. Cans and glass rained down. Abel grabbed the shotgun barrel and wrenched it from her hands with impossible strength. He threw it aside and backhanded her across the room. Mara struck the counter and dropped. The world went white. When she could see again, Abel had Celia. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing, one hand tangled in her shirt, the other under her arm. Celia fought weakly, screaming Mara's name. Her injured leg hung useless. Abel turned toward the door. Mara crawled after him. No. Micah rose behind Abel with the fallen chainsaw. It was too heavy for him, but terror gave him strength. He yanked the cord once, nothing twice. The motor coughed. Abel turned. Micah pulled a third time. The saw roared to life. Micah thrust it forward, not with skill, not with control, but with desperate force. Abel recoiled as the blade struck the hanging lantern the old woman held in the doorway. The lantern shattered. Fire splashed across the threshold, catching on spilled fuel from a leaking can near the wall. Flames rose instantly. The old woman screamed, not in fear, in fury. My house, she cried, my boy. Abel dropped Celia and stumbled back from the fire. His apron caught at the edge. He patted at it with huge hands, squealing. Micah lost control of the saw and let it fall. Mara crawled to Celia and dragged her behind the counter. The station filled with smoke. The old woman backed away, dress burning at the hem. She beat at the flames with her hands, still singing through clenched teeth, hymn broken into sobs. Abel stumbled through the doorway after her. Mara found the shotgun. One shell left. Outside, the fire spread along the side wall, fed by dry wood, dust, and old fuel. The canopy began to glow orange. The old woman knelt beneath it, patting Abel's burning apron, murmuring to him as though he were a child who had fallen from a swing. Good boy, she said. Mama's good boy. Mara stepped into the doorway. The smoke stung her eyes. The shotgun felt enormous in her hands. The old woman looked up. For one moment, the kindness returned to her face. False or real, Mara could not tell. It was the face she had shown them on the porch. A grandmother's face, a church face, a face that had welcomed people inside and watched the door close behind them. "You don't know hunger," the old woman said. Mara aimed at the fuel pump behind her. "I know enough." She fired. The pump burst apart in sparks and flame. The explosion was not like the movies. It was a hard, flat thunderclap that knocked Mara backward into the station. Heat rolled over her. Glass shattered. The canopy groaned. Outside, the night became orange. Mara's ears rang. She could hear Celia coughing, Micah shouting. They crawled out through the broken front window, squeezing between the bars where one had torn loose from the frame. Behind them, the station burned. The old woman was gone in the flames. Abel's shape moved within them, huge and staggering, then disappeared behind black smoke. Mara, Celia, and Micah collapsed in the dirt beyond the pumps. For a few seconds, there was no chase, no chainsaw, no hymn, only fire. Then from the flames, Abel emerged. His apron was burning. His mask had blackened and curled, pieces of it peeling away, revealing part of his real face beneath. It was scarred, pale, and childlike, twisted by pain and rage. One eye glared at them. The other was hidden behind a strip of the ruined mask still clinging to his skin. In his hands, he held the chainsaw. It should not have worked. It had been dropped, struck, soaked in smoke and heat. But Abel pulled the cord, and the engine screamed awake one final time. Celia began to crawl backward. Micah stood in front of her. Mara looked around for a weapon and found nothing but a length of chain near the pump. She wrapped it around her hands. Abel came on. Each step was slower now. He was badly hurt, but he was still moving, and the saw was still alive. Mara screamed and ran at him. She did not know why. Maybe because there was nowhere left to run. Maybe because Tate had stood in the bus. Owen had stood in the plant. Micah had gone back for strangers. Maybe survival at its end was not running, but choosing the moment to turn. Abel swung the chainsaw. Mara threw herself low. The blade tore through the air above her with a hot metallic shriek. She slammed into his knees. He staggered. Micah joined her, striking Abel's wounded side with a piece of broken pipe. Abel howled and swung his arm, sending Micah sprawling. Mara looped the chain around Abel's ankle. Celia, from the ground, grabbed the other end and pulled with all the strength she had left. Abel stepped back. His foot caught. He fell. The chainsaw flew from his hands and landed in the dirt, still screaming, spinning in place like a living thing. Abel reached for it. Mara grabbed the chain and pulled harder, dragging his leg away. Micah rose and kicked the saw. It skidded toward the burning station. Abel crawled after it. The canopy gave way. A section of burning metal collapsed, striking the ground between Abel and the saw. Sparks burst upward. The saw vanished beneath falling debris. Abel stopped. For the first time, he looked afraid, not of death, of being separated from the thing that gave his fear a voice. Mara stood over him, trembling. Abel looked up at her. The ruined mask hung from one side of his face. Beneath it, his mouth opened and closed. He tried to speak. What came out was a broken sound, almost a word, almost a plea. From the burning station came the old woman's voice, impossibly still alive. Abel. He turned toward it. Mama, he said. The word was soft, human, devastating. Then he crawled into the fire. Mara watched him go, watched his huge shape vanish through smoke, and sparks toward the voice that had made him into a monster and called it love. The fuel tank beneath the station caught moments later. This explosion lifted the night. Mara felt herself thrown backward. The sky split white and orange. Heat passed over her like a giant hand. Then darkness swallowed everything. She woke to dawn. At first, she thought the world had ended quietly. The sky was pale blue. The fire had burned down to blackened beams and smoking metal. Ash drifted through the air like gray snow. Celia lay beside her, breathing shallowly. Micah sat nearby with his arms wrapped around his knees, staring at nothing. In the distance, sirens approached. Real sirens. Mara began to cry. Deputies found them at the station just after sunrise. Ambulances followed. Men with hard faces and rifles searched the property. They found Tate in the school bus and Owen in the packing plant. They found Silas at the plant office window, barely alive, whispering curses through broken teeth. He died before they loaded him into the ambulance. They found the farmhouse last. By then the sun had risen fully, bright and pitiless. Mara did not want to see it, but she had to tell them where Micah's sister might be. She stood at the edge of the yard, wrapped in a blanket, while officers moved through the house with masks over their faces. One came out and vomited in the weeds. Another crossed himself. The house was worse than any of them had imagined. Inside, the walls were covered with photographs, hair, old driver's licenses, and jewelry pinned like decorations. The dining room table was set for 8, though only 3 members of the family had lived there. Bowls made from human skulls rested at each place, polished smooth, their rims worn by use. The chairs were upholstered in stretched human skin, stitched carefully over the cushions, some pieces tattooed, some freckled, some still bearing faint scars from lives that had ended in that house. In the sitting room, lampshades were fashioned from pale hide. Wind chimes made from finger bones hung near the open windows. On the mantel sat jars containing teeth sorted by size, rings still attached to severed fingers long dried by time, and small bundles of hair tied with ribbon. Masks hung on the wall in rows. Human faces, preserved, stitched, painted, some with makeup carefully applied, some with eyelashes still clinging to the lids. Men's faces, women's faces, young faces, old faces, the stolen expressions of the dead, waiting for Abel to choose who he would become. In the kitchen, the deputies found a long wooden table carved with hundreds of names. Some were full names. Some were only initials. Some were marks made by people who had no time left for letters. In a locked room beneath the stairs, they found Micah's sister. Alive, barely. Her name was Ruth. And when they carried her into the morning light, Micah fell to his knees beside the stretcher and took her hand. She did not open her eyes, but her fingers moved around his. Mara turned away and looked at the road. Cress Road seemed smaller in daylight, dusty, empty, almost ordinary. That was the cruelest part. By noon, reporters began to gather at the highway. By evening, the county had blocked the road. By the next morning, every news station in the state knew the name Cress. They talked about the failed meat plant, the disappearances, the corrupt inspections, the rumors ignored for decades. They counted the dead as if numbers could hold them, but numbers could not hold Tate laughing in the van. Numbers could not hold Owen apologizing in the dark. Numbers could not hold Celia's hand squeezing Mara. As doctors reset her leg, numbers could not hold Abel saying mama before crawling into fire. For weeks, Mara did not sleep without hearing the chainsaw. Celia moved back east and never entered a rural gas station again. Micah and Ruth testified against what remained of the Cress estate, though there was little to prosecute once the fires finished their work. The farmhouse was demolished, the packing plant sealed, and Cress Road was officially removed from county records, though some locals insisted it had never been there to begin with. Mara kept one thing from that night. Not a trophy, not evidence. A small strip of paper Owen had dropped in the plant office. She found it stuck to her shoe in the hospital, damp with mud and blood. It was part of an old inspection notice, torn across the middle. Most of the words were missing. Only one sentence remained. Conditions unsuitable for human habitation. She folded it and kept it in her wallet. Years passed. Mara stopped making documentaries. She moved to a city where the loudest things at night were buses, sirens, and neighbors arguing through apartment walls. She told herself she liked the noise because it proved people were nearby. She married no one. She bought no car. She avoided highways that crossed open land. Every year, on the anniversary, she received a message from Celia. Still here, Mara always replied the same way. Still here. On the 10th anniversary, the message came late. Mara was sitting at her kitchen table, rain tapping the window, when her phone buzzed. Still here, Celia wrote. Then another message arrived. Do you ever dream about the house? Mara stared at it for a long time. Yes, she typed. Celia's reply came almost immediately. I dream about the masks. Mara closed her eyes. She had never told Celia this, but she dreamed about them too. Not the chase, not the fire, the masks, the row of faces on the wall waiting. In her dreams, one space was always empty, a hook with nothing on it, a place reserved. For years, she had told herself that was only trauma. The mind returning to horror, arranging it into symbols. Then Celia sent a photograph. It was blurry, taken from inside a car at night. Headlights illuminated a rural road. A road sign leaned against a fence post, warped and peeling. Cress Road. Mara stood so fast, her chair fell backward. Her phone rang. Celia. Mara answered, but for a moment there was only static. Then Celia whispered, "I am in Oklahoma." "Mara, I am nowhere near Texas." "Where are you?" "I do not know. The GPS went dead. There was a detour. I thought it was a county road." Mara gripped the phone. "Turn around." I tried. Rain hit Mara's window harder. On the phone, beneath Celia's breathing, Mara heard gravel under tires. Then another sound, faint at first, a low mechanical cough, a growl. Mara's blood turned cold. "Celia," she said, "do not stop." The sound grew louder. The old scream of a chainsaw rose through the phone, distorted by distance and static, but unmistakable. Celia began to cry. "Mara," she whispered, "there is a light ahead." The call ended. Mara called back. No service. She called again. Nothing. She called the police in Celia's town, then highway patrol, then every county along the route Celia had said she was taking. She gave names, roads, descriptions, the story that always made people go quiet. They promised to look. They promised to call. At dawn, Celia's car was found on the shoulder of a highway outside Tulsa. Empty, no blood, no broken glass, no sign of struggle. Her phone was on the driver's seat, dead. The last photograph remained in its memory. Cress Road. Authorities said it was impossible. There was no such road in Oklahoma. No detour had been reported. No farmhouse, no plant, no station, nothing. 3 days later, Mara received a package with no return address. Inside was a small cassette tape. She had to visit 3 pawn shops before she found a player that worked. She brought it home, set it on the kitchen table, and pressed play with a shaking finger. For several seconds, there was only static. Then Celia's voice, not screaming, not crying, whispering, "Mara, if you get this, do not come looking." A pause. Something creaked in the background. Celia breathed hard. They are not gone. Another pause. Then a second voice spoke, low and thick. A man's voice. Not Sela's. Not Abel, unless fire and death had changed him. "Pretty face," it said. Celia sobbed once. The tape hissed. Then came the sound Mara had heard in every nightmare for 10 years. The chainsaw. She threw the player across the room. It struck the wall and shattered. The tape unspooled across the floor in long black ribbons. Myra did not call the police again. That night she packed a bag, not because she believed she could save Celia, not because she believed she could defeat whatever remained of the Cress family. She packed because there was an empty hook on the wall in her dreams, and she had finally understood that waiting was only another kind of being hunted. She drove south in a rented car, away from the city, into a country of open fields and long roads. She drove through rain, then heat, then dusk. At every gas station, people told her there was no Cress Road. At every county office, the maps showed nothing. At every motel, she dreamed of bone chimes and skull bowls and chairs upholstered in skin. On the third evening, somewhere beyond a town with no name on her map, she saw the sign. It leaned against a fence post. Cress Road. Myra stopped the car. The sun was low and red. Far down the road, a single yellow bulb burned above a porch. Myra reached into the passenger seat and picked up the shotgun she had bought 2 towns back. Her hands did not shake this time. From the hollow ahead came a sound like metal teeth waking. Myra stepped onto the road. The dust rose around her boots. The house waited, and somewhere inside, among the masks of the dead, something began to laugh. That was tonight's story. A reminder that some roads are not on maps for a reason, and some houses do not need to stand in one place to keep finding their way back into the world. Thanks for listening. Please like the video, subscribe for more, and leave a comment. Good night.
Whispers of a love so true, painting dreams of me and you. And I'll hold you close in this moment.